The communication array on New Haven crackled with static as Sarah Chen pressed her bloodied palm against the emergency transmit button. Behind her, the sounds of destruction echoed through the colony's main hub, screaming metal, shattering glass, and something far worse. Something that made sounds no human throat could produce. "This is Colony Administrator Sarah Chen of New Haven," she whispered into the transmitter, her voice barely steady. "Emergency Protocol 7 is in effect. Repeat, Protocol 7, the Vectar have found us." Through the reinforced windows of the communication center, she could see the alien ships hovering over her dying colony like metallic vultures. Their hulls were a sick shade of green-black that seemed to absorb light itself. 37 ships. Not a large fleet by galactic standards, but more than enough to reduce New Haven's population of 50,000 to ash in memory. They came. Without warning, Sarah continued, flinching as another explosion rocked the building. No demands, no communication, they simply began. Her voice cracked. Orbital bombardment commenced at 0347 local time. Ground forces deployed at 0352. Colony defenses were overwhelmed in minutes. The door to the communications center burst open. Sarah spun around, expecting to see one of the mantis-like Vectar soldiers with their chitinous armor and razor-sharp limbs. Instead, Marcus Rivera stumbled in, his security uniform torn and blood-stained. "Sarah, we need to go now." Marcus grabbed her arm. "They've breached the lower levels. The evacuation shuttles are already gone," Sarah finished grimly. "I watched them burn on the launch pads." Marcus's face went pale. Through the static of the transmitter, they could hear a voice, distant, professional, emanating from Earth itself, 23 light-years away. "New Haven, this is Earth Defense Command. Please confirm your status. We're reading massive energy signatures in your system." Sarah looked at Marcus, then back at the transmitter. Her next words would travel across the void to reach humanity's homeworld. Her next words might be New Haven's epitaph. "Earth Defense Command," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "New Haven has fallen. 50,000 souls lost to the Vectar hegemony. They're not just conquering us, they're studying us, taking samples. This isn't random expansion, this is preparation." The building shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. "Tell Earth," Sarah continued, her eyes meeting Marcus's. "Tell them the Vectar know about the core worlds now. They know about Earth. And they're coming." Static filled the channel. Then, after a moment that felt like eternity, the response came. "Message received. New Haven. Help is coming. Earth will not forget." But as the transmission ended, and alien footsteps echoed in the corridor, outside, Sarah Chen knew that help, if it came at all, would arrive far too late for New Haven. The last human colony on the rim had fallen, and humanity's response would shake the galaxy to its core. Chapter 2. The Council of War 6. Months after New Haven's final transmission, the underground war room beneath Luna's Shackleton crater hummed with barely contained fury. The chamber, carved from solid rock and lined with quantum-shielded walls, had hosted many critical meetings in humanity's expansion across the stars. None had felt quite like this. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the holographic display, her weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of tactical projections. Around the circular table sat the most powerful individuals in human space: Fleet Admiral Zhang of the Seoul Defense Force, Director Harrison of Colonial Intelligence, and President Maria Santos herself, who had traveled from Earth specifically for this briefing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Vasquez began, her voice carrying the weight of decades in space, "the situation is worse than we initially believed." The hologram shifted, showing the galactic rim where human colonies dotted the darkness like scattered jewels. Red markers began appearing, first one, then dozens. "In the past 6 months since New Haven, we've lost contact with 17 more colonies," Vasquez continued. "Not just communications blackouts, complete disappearance. Merchant ships that arrive find empty worlds, stripped of all technology and biological matter." Director Harrison leaned forward, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on the display. Our deep space reconnaissance confirms Admiral Vasquez's assessment. The Vectar aren't just attacking randomly. They're systematically harvesting our outer colonies, working their way inward toward the core worlds. Harvesting, President Santos repeated, her voice cold. You mean murdering? I mean exactly what I said, Madam President. Harrison's expression remained neutral, but his organic eye betrayed a flicker of anger. They're taking everything, people, technology, even the soil itself. Our xenobiologists believe they're creating detailed profiles of human physiology and our technological capabilities. Fleet Admiral Zhang, a man whose calm demeanor had seen humanity through 3 previous conflicts, spoke for the first time. They're preparing for a full-scale invasion of human space. This isn't conquest, it's extermination preceded by reconnaissance. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. On the display, the red markers continued to spread inward, each one representing thousands or millions of lives lost. How long? President Santos asked quietly. Based on their current rate of expansion, Admiral Vasquez replied, they'll reach the mid-rim colonies within 18 months, the core worlds, including Earth itself, within 3 years, unless we stop them first. The voice belonged to Admiral Zhang, but the tone was unlike anything they'd heard from the normally diplomatic officer. When he stood, his full height seemed to fill the room. Madam President, Zhang continued, I'm requesting immediate authorization for Operation Righteous Fury. President Santos raised an eyebrow. I'm not familiar with that designation, Admiral. Because it doesn't exist yet, Zhang replied. It's what I'm proposing we call humanity's response to the Vectar threat. The holographic display shifted again, now showing the industrial shipyards orbiting Earth, Mars, and the major colony worlds. Thousands of construction berths stretched into space, most currently building merchant vessels and exploration ships. Every shipyard in human space, Zhang explained, converted to military production. Every merchant marine academy transformed into a naval college. Every mining operation in the asteroid belts redirected to provide raw materials for ship construction. You're talking about total war mobilization, President Santos said. I'm talking about survival, Zhang replied. The Vectar have shown us what they intend. They want to study us, understand us, and then eliminate us. I propose we don't give them the chance. Director Harrison accessed his datapad. Current human defense fleet numbers approximately 12,000 active warships of all classes. Against an enemy that destroyed New Haven with just 37 vessels, we'll need 700,000, Admiral Vasquez interrupted. Minimum. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. 700,000 warships? President Santos's voice was barely above a whisper. The largest fleet in galactic history, Zhang confirmed. It will require every resource we have, every sacrifice we can make. But it sends a message that no species in this galaxy will ever forget. And what message is that, Admiral? Zhang's eyes met each person at the table in turn before he answered. That when you kill 50,000 humans, 700,000 ships come to collect the debt. President Santos was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays, the casualty reports, the projections of human expansion, suddenly cut short by an alien threat unlike any they'd faced before. Authorization granted, she said finally. Operation Righteous Fury is approved. Admiral Zhang, I'm placing you in command of the largest military mobilization in human history. As the meeting broke up and the various commanders began the monumental task of transforming human civilization into a war machine, none of them noticed the small addendum that Director Harrison quietly added to the operational files. The Vectar had made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that the species they were studying responded to threats the way most civilized galaxies did, with negotiation, retreat, or limited defensive action. They had not accounted for the fact that humans, when pushed to the edge of extinction, didn't just fight back, they brought everyone. 2 years after New Haven's fall, the Sol system had become unrecognizable. Captain James Bull Morrison guided his inspection shuttle through the industrial maze that now surrounded Earth's moon. Where once Luna had been a quiet research outpost and mining operation, It had transformed into the beating heart of humanity's greatest undertaking. Shipyards stretched from Luna's poles to its equator, massive construction bays that could be seen from Earth's surface with the naked eye. Each bay housed a warship in various stages of completion, from the skeletal frameworks of destroyer escorts to the massive kilometer-long dreadnoughts that would serve as fleet flagships. "First time seeing the forge?" asked Commander Lisa. Park, Bull's navigation officer and unofficial tour guide. "First time this close," Bull admitted, watching as a newly completed cruiser detached from its construction cradle. The ship was massive, bristling with weapon systems and armor plating that gleamed in the reflected light of Earth. "The pictures don't do it justice." "Wait until you see the numbers," Park said, pulling up her datapad. "We're completing an average of 300 ships per day across all shipyards in human space. Earth's lunar facilities account for about 60% of that production." Bull whistled low. 300 ships per day. In the old Navy, a single ship took months or even years to build. Now, humanity was churning out entire fleets in the time it used to take to construct a frigate. "How?" he asked. "Revolutionary manufacturing techniques," Park explained. "Automated construction using AI systems, molecular assemblers, and something the eggheads call quantum-assisted metallurgy. Plus, we're not building these ships to last 40 years like the old fleet. These are built for one purpose." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in human space knew what that purpose was. Their shuttle docked with the massive command station that coordinated the forge's operations. As they made their way through the corridors, Bull was struck by the diversity of the people working here. Engineers from Europa, miners from the Belt, former merchant spacers who had volunteered for military service. All of them wore the same expression, grim determination mixed with barely controlled rage. The briefing room was packed with naval officers from across human space, each representing a different aspect of Operation Righteous Fury. Admiral Zhang stood at the front, older, now than when Bull had last seen him, with gray streaking his hair and new lines around his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zhang began, "as of this morning we have reached our initial production target." The massive display behind him lit up with numbers that seemed impossible. 700,437 active warships across all classes, from single-pilot fighters to the new Vengeance-class dreadnoughts, the largest military fleet in recorded galactic history. A murmur ran through the room. They'd done it. Somehow, impossibly, they'd done it. But numbers alone won't win this war, Zhang continued. "The Vectar have had 2 years to study our responses, to prepare for what they know is coming. Intelligence suggests they've consolidated their forces into several massive fleets, each numbering in the tens of thousands of ships." Director Harrison stepped forward, his cybernetic implants glowing as he accessed classified data. "Our reconnaissance indicates the Vectar are marshaling their forces at 3 key positions along the galactic rim. Each represents a staging ground for their planned invasion of human space." The display shifted to show 3 star systems, each marked with ominous red indicators. "Kepler 442, Harrison continued, "where they've constructed what appears to be a massive shipyard of their own. Gliese 667C, which has become their forward command center, and Ross 128, where our long-range scans detect energy signatures consistent with something we've never seen before." "What kind of something?" asked Captain Sarah Kim, one of the dreadnought commanders. Harrison's expression darkened. "The kind that makes our xenobiologists lose sleep at night. Whatever they're building at Ross 128, it's big enough to be visible from 12 light-years away." Admiral Zhang retook the podium. "Which brings us to our strategy. Operation Righteous Fury will commence in 3 phases. Phase 1, simultaneous strikes on their outer positions to eliminate their reconnaissance networks. Phase 2, full assault on their staging grounds at Kepler 442 and Gliese 667C. Phase 3, he paused and Bull could see the weight of command in the Admiral's eyes. Phase 3, whatever they're building at Ross 128, we make sure it never sees completion." The room erupted in questions, tactical discussions, and the controlled chaos that accompanied any major military operation. But Bull found himself staring at the display, at those 3 red dots that represented humanity's future. 700,000 ships. The largest fleet ever assembled by any species in the galaxy. It might not be enough. As the briefing continued and the final preparations for humanity's greatest gamble took shape, Bull couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. Some critical piece of the puzzle that the Vectar had been carefully constructing while humanity built its armada. Outside the station's windows, the forge continued its work. Ships were born in fire and metal, crewed by men and women who understood that they were carrying not just weapons into battle, but the hopes and fury of an entire species. 50,000 dead at New Haven, 700,000 ships to answer. Thikau. Math seemed simple enough. But in the cold depths of space, Bull Morrison was beginning to suspect that mathematics alone wouldn't determine the outcome of what was coming. Chapter 4. The Price of Vengeance. Admiral Zhang stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, flagship of humanity's greatest fleet, and watched as 700,000 ships prepared to jump to war. The sight defied comprehension. Stretching in all directions, visible even to the naked eye, was a constellation of human engineering that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dreadnoughts the size of small cities, carrier groups that could house entire populations, destroyer squadrons that moved in perfect formation like schools of mechanical fish. All fleet elements report ready for jump, announced Commander Torres, the Retribution's executive officer. Phase drives charging across all vessels. Signal from the Harrison, reported Communications Officer Patel. Director Harrison confirms intelligence assets are in position at target systems. Zhang nodded. 2 years of preparation, 2 years of transforming human civilization into the galaxy's greatest war machine had led to this moment. In 30 seconds, the largest military force in recorded history would disappear into phase space and emerge in 3 separate star systems to deliver humanity's answer to the Vectar threat. "Admiral," came a quiet voice from behind him. Zhang turned to see Captain Morrison approaching, his expression troubled. "Bull, what is it?" Morrison handed him a data pad. "Long-range reconnaissance just picked this up from Ross 128. You need to see this before we jump." Zhang studied the readings, his expression growing increasingly grim. Energy signatures that made no sense. Gravitational anomalies that suggested something massive, far more massive than any ship or space station, and underneath it all a pattern that their xenobiologists had been tracking for months. "They're not building a weapon," Zhang said quietly. "No, sir," Morrison confirmed. "They're building a gateway." The implications hit Zhang like a physical blow. Everything they'd assumed about the Vectar strategy was wrong. The attacks on human colonies weren't preparation for invasion, they were field tests. The Vectar weren't marshaling forces for conquest, they were opening a door for something else entirely. "Signal all fleet commanders," Zhang ordered. "Emergency priority channel." Across the vast expanse of the human fleet, communication arrays came alive as Zhang's voice reached every ship simultaneously. "This is Admiral Zhang to all vessels. We have new intelligence regarding the Ross 128 target. The Vectar are constructing what appears to be a massive gateway device. Purpose unknown, but the implications are..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Potentially catastrophic." On the bridge of the dreadnought Yamato, Admiral Keiko Tanaka absorbed this information with the calm that had made her one of humanity's most respected commanders. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, but she could see the tension in their movements. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "if they're building a gateway, the energy requirements alone suggest they're trying to breach dimensional barriers, or bring something through from somewhere else," Tanaka finished. "Something that would require the elimination of local resistance first." Aboard the carrier Midway, Admiral Carlos Rivera was running similar calculations. "If they've been studying us to understand our capabilities," he told his staff, "then they've been preparing whatever comes through that gateway to counter everything we can throw at it." Back on the Retribution, Zhang found himself facing the hardest decision of his career. Proceed with the original plan and risk walking into a trap designed specifically for humanity's tactics and technology? Or abort the mission and give the Vector time to complete whatever they were building at Ross 128? Sir, Commander Torres announced, we're receiving priority signals from Earth. President Santos wants a direct conference. The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Earth's president. Behind her, John could see the underground command center where humanity's leadership had been coordinating the war effort. Admiral, President Santos began without preamble, we've been monitoring your communications. Our theoretical physicists have been analyzing the Ross 128 data. She paused, and John could see the weight of terrible knowledge in her expression. They believe the Vector are attempting to open a stable wormhole to the Andromeda galaxy. The energy signatures match theoretical models for transgalactic gateway technology. The bridge fell silent. Transgalactic. Not just interstellar, but between entire galaxies. Madam President, Zhang said carefully, are you suggesting that the Vector are not the primary threat? I'm suggesting, Santos replied, that the Vector may be running from something, and they're about to bring it here. Zhang absorbed this information, his mind racing through the tactical implications. If the Vector were refugees rather than conquerors, if they were opening a gateway for something that had driven them from Andromeda, our orders remain unchanged, Santos continued, but with new priority. Ross 128 must be stopped at all costs. Whatever's coming through that gateway, it cannot be allowed to establish a foothold in our galaxy. Understood, Madam President. The communication ended. Zhang looked out at his massive fleet with new understanding. 700,000 ships had seemed like overwhelming force against the Vector, against something that could drive an entire species across the void between galaxies. All vessels, Zhang announced. Jump countdown resumes, 30 seconds, to phase shift. Around him, the bridge crew worked with the efficiency of professionals who understood that they were no longer just avenging New Haven. They were standing guard at the gates of the galaxy itself. 15 seconds. Bull Morrison, watching from the tactical station, found himself thinking about Sarah Chen's final transmission. The Vector know about Earth, and they're coming. She'd been right, but incomplete. The Vector knew about Earth, because they needed to clear it out of the way. 5 seconds. Whatever was coming through that gateway, humanity would meet it with everything they had. Jump! 700,000 ships vanished into phase space, carrying humanity's fury toward a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of human civilization, but the future of the galaxy itself. In the cold depths of space, the EI gateway at Ross 128 pulsed with energy that came from somewhere unimaginably far away, and something began to stir in the darkness between stars. Epilogue. What comes after? 6 months after the Battle of Ross 128, Director Harrison stood in Santino, the ruins of what had once been the Vector Gateway facility. The artificial planet they had constructed around the star was now a debris field, shattered by weapons that had never been tested until humanity brought 700,000 ships to this distant corner of space. But victory had come at a cost that still kept him awake at night. The final casualty reports, Admiral Zhang said, approaching through the wreckage. His uniform was different now, not the deep blue of the Human Defense Force, but the silver and black of the new organization they'd been forced to create. Harrison accepted the datapad without looking at it. He already knew the numbers. 312,000 ships lost, nearly 4 million personnel, the largest military engagement in galactic history, and humanity had paid for it in blood and metal. Was it worth it? Zhang asked quietly. Harrison gestured toward the massive structure that dominated the center of the facility, or what was left of it. The gateway had been partially activated when the human fleet arrived. For 17 minutes, something had been coming through from Andromeda before humanity's weapons finally collapsed the dimensional breach. Look at the scan data from those 17 minutes, Harrison said. Look at what we glimpsed on the other side. Zhang accessed the files, then went pale. Ships the size of moons. Technology that bent physics in ways that shouldn't be possible. And behind it all, an intelligence so vast and alien that their best xenobiologists couldn't even begin to categorize it. The Vectar weren't conquerors, Harrison continued. They were refugees, running from something that makes our worst nightmares look like children's fairy tales. And now it knows we're here. Now it knows we're here, Harrison confirmed. The quantum entanglement created by the gateway collapse means they have our galactic coordinates. It's not a matter of if they'll come looking for us, but when. Zhang was quiet for a long moment, studying the wreckage around them. How long? Best estimates? 50 years, maybe 100. Long enough for them to find another way across the void between galaxies. And the Vectar survivors? Harrison smiled grimly. That had been the war's strangest outcome. When faced with the choice between extinction at human hands or cooperation against a common threat, the remaining Vectar had chosen cooperation. They're adapting surprisingly well to the integration process, he said. Turns out they have some very interesting defensive technologies. Their ships are fast, maneuverable, and designed for running away from overwhelming force. Skills we might need. Skills we will need. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as human and Vectar work crews continued the massive salvage operation. The technology recovered from the Gateway facility was already revolutionizing human science, but it came with the terrible knowledge of what it had been designed to escape. So what now? Zhang asked. Harrison pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy in its entirety. Red markers indicated human colonies, blue showed Vectar territories, and green represented the handful of other species that had been approached about the new alliance. Now we prepare for the real war, Harrison said. 700,000. Ships weren't enough last time. Next time we'll need 7 million. And the time after that, to the entire galaxy. The entire galaxy, Harrison confirmed. Humanity survived by learning to work together. Now we teach that lesson to everyone else. Above them, the first ships of the new Galactic Defense Alliance moved through space, human dreadnoughts flying, alongside Vectar cruisers and the crystalline vessels of the Altarian Collective. It was an impossible sight just a year ago. Now it was the only hope any of them had. In the depths of space, something stirred in the darkness between galaxies. Ancient, hungry, patient. It had tasted this galaxy once through the brief opening that had been torn in space-time. It knew there was life here, intelligent civilizations that could be consumed to fuel its endless expansion. It would find another way across the void, and when it arrived, it would discover that the small species that had destroyed its gateway had spent the intervening decades teaching the entire galaxy a simple lesson. When you threaten one world, you face one world. When you threaten the galaxy itself, you face everything it contains. The children of Earth had learned to share their fury, and the cosmos would never be the same. The end.